What's your definition of energy?
When you're successful, you stop receiving signal from the world. You face silence or you face noise. And then you can start doing things which can take you in a wrong path.
Why does achievement sometimes create emptiness?
This is where a little bit of the why and the purpose starts beginning to matter. And if you're doing it for the money, then you plateau very quickly.
Correct.
You have to be consumed by something which is beyond the money. Doing really work well in your career is a bit like scoring 100 in math, but failing the other subjects. The real question is, how do you do the exam of life? So when you're playing, you don't clock hours. You don't say, I'll play only for 1 hour. You'll play as long as you want. When you discover play, and if you found a market for it, then you start accelerating.
Nearly 50% of CEOs report feeling isolated in their role. But is leadership loneliness structurally, or it is self-created?
There is a structural piece to this. So I think the key is really...
Who coaches the coach, Deepak? Today on the PVT show, we sit down with a man who has spent nearly a decade studying one uncomfortable truth. Why do successful leaders still feel so unfulfilled? I sit with this amazing author and a coach, Deepak Jayaraman. He built his early career across top consulting and global firms before choosing a rare path in his career, becoming a long-term thinking partner to growth mindset CEOs. Host of the Play to Potential podcast, he believes potential is not about achievement, it is about alignment. This conversation is much beyond just career growth. And if you are a leader or someone who coaches leaders, treat this as a super masterclass. You do not want to really miss this. Let's go and meet the very awesome Deepak.
Hi, I'm Deepak Jayaraman, and you're watching me on the PVT Show podcast.
Hi Deepak, welcome to the PVT show.
Thank you.
After your book, which is a bestseller now, your story from top consulting firms to you pivoting into an absolutely rare path and then making a mark for yourself could be a great learning journey for so many people in the business world, corporate world. It's a dynamic environment and circumstance. So constantly the world outside of you is also changing, and the world inside of you is also asking to constantly change.
True.
So my first question to you in this would be, what is coaching, Deepak?
Coaching can mean different things to different people, Poonam. I think the simplest way I would describe it is to really walk the journey with a person, show the mirror, and help the person find his or her own answers as we walk. And I think it's much less about giving the answer, much less about here's what I've done. It's much more about helping them introspect, helping them ask the right question, helping them find their own answers, because every journey is unique. Each one of us is on a different journey. So the simplest way I would say, of course, I mean, there's sports coaching, there's fitness coaching, there's, coaching is a very broad term, but at a very basic level, I would say coaching as a practice of helping somebody become a better version of themselves by helping them conduct an inquiry and find answers, and helping them frame the right questions, showing the mirror, pressure testing what they're saying, helping them be honest with themselves and find the answers that work for them. That's the way I would define it at the basic level.
You are coaching and sitting with leaders who are running billion-dollar businesses. They also need this hand-holding. Sometimes I think
it's a bit like this, right? A child who's 5 years old needs a mirror. A man who's 60 years old needs a mirror. A billion-dollar CEO needs a mirror. The mirror has a functionality which doesn't go away when you make money, which doesn't go away when you grow older. What also happens is when you're successful, you stop receiving signal from the world. And what I mean by that is either you face silence or you face noise. What I mean by that is very often if you're the leader, people stop speaking the truth to you because of fear sometimes. Because, if they give you candid feedback, they might lose their job or they might lose their business if you're a vendor. And they often have their own agendas, they have their own careers. So sometimes they are managing their career and managing your ego. And sometimes they start saying things that necessarily aren't true, but you like to hear. So what also happens is as people become more successful, it's like King Emperor's clothes, right? If you've read that story. Sometimes the world doesn't tell you who you are and what you're doing. It probably will clap when you fail. But it's a little, since you said, do successful CEOs need it? Sometimes it's just that success gets to your head, you stop receiving signal from the world, and then you can start doing things which can take you in a wrong path or in a different path.
So is it safe to say that coaching will help you again go and build the bridges with your own people?
I think so. See, I think once again, coaching can mean different things, but I think the way I think about coaching, it's transformative across various dimensions. Hopefully, it helps you become a better version of yourself. And hopefully that shows up in the way you interact with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your investors. So I think very often I've noticed that change is not unidimensional. When people transform, they transform across dimensions. For example, one of the leaders I'm coaching, I've been working with him for the last 3-4 years. He's a general partner in a venture capital fund. A lot of our conversations were around how he could communicate, how he could listen, how he could suspend his judgment, etc. But he started a fitness regimen on the side around the same time. And he's now lean, fit, and extremely conscious of diet, what he eats, how he exercises. And he often says that sometimes when you are making change in a certain dimension, it also gives you the momentum to pursue change in another. It just I think there's a certain interconnection between symphony. That's a lovely term. I like to play the guitar, so that's a very beautiful term. So I think there's a symphony, harmony across multiple dimensions, which sometimes start playing out. Although not intentional, but sometimes it can be a side effect, a beneficial side effect.
You followed what many consider the golden track of success. At what moment in your career you realize that success and potential are not the same thing? Did you realize that?
Now, this itself could be a 40-minute response. I think, I come from the Indian middle class. My father was a public sector banker, and in the South, the general narrative was go after Saraswati and hopefully you will find Lakshmi, right? And in a way, where I was, I think doing well in math meant engineering was a choice. If you wanted to do engineering, then IITs were considered as a gold standard. So I was lucky to be in a school where, there was a healthy peer environment for me to study and perform. Yeah, I had the benefit of being in a school with competitive people. So in my year, actually, from my school, All India 2nd rank, All India 5th rank, All India 18th rank. Sundar Pichai's younger brother was in my class, and he was one of the brightest people I've ever met in my life. So I think just that peer momentum gets you to work hard. It's a bit like how people say, right, if you went to Shivaji Park, you ended up playing cricket with the best of the best. And even if you are the 5th best player in Shivaji Park, you might end up playing for India. Because that's just the quality of talent in that place. So I was lucky to be in that kind of a school, which I would say probably is the equivalent of DPS in Chennai, Padma Seshadri. And then after that, there was a desire to go to the US. I had a fellowship from a US university. I got into IIM Ahmedabad. Somehow there was a desire to stay in India. This notion of living in the West, of course, that changed over time, but that took me to IMA. Then I got a chance to work with KPMG in the UK. Till then, I would say I'm going back to your question. What was success? I think initially success was just getting into some of these elite institutions, whether it's an educational institution or organization. After KPMG in the UK and in India, there was a desire to work overseas, build a career overseas, which took me to London Business School. After which McKinsey was an aspirational place. So I got into McKinsey, New Jersey. So I would say these are all, I saw these as markers of achieving a certain level of success. As if you belong to these institutions and if you made it, quote unquote, then you've achieved success. I would say 2008 changed a lot of things for me. My father got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer back in Chennai in India. And my wife and we came back to take care of his treatment. And he passed away in 6 months in October 2008. But I was grateful that I could spend the 6 months in India. McKinsey was kind enough to, give me a transfer, and it's a caring meritocracy. Many people see the meritocracy, but I got to see the caring element of the firm. Just spending those 6 months with him, I think, gave me a sense of what, if I may say, end of life or what matters in the end. Sometimes when you see a parent or you see somebody counting down, it gives you perspective. I would say till then I was leading a current plus kind of a life. that gave me a window into what a future minus life could look like. If this is the finish line, then how do we work back from it, if that makes sense. So I would say that's the first time I sort of went on an inner journey. I went to Art of Living. That sort of got me to think a little bit about who I am, what gives me joy, etc. One of my mentors felt I had a passion for the people side of things, so he connected me to this firm, Egon Zehnder. That was where I was helping companies recruit CEOs and CXOs. But there, over time, I realized that executive search is it can feel like a broking business. At the end of the day, you're broking talent, right? And there's a certain transactionality to it. As one of my friends put it, I felt I had more of a coaching mindset than a poaching mindset, right? So that's a transition made about 10 years back. Feb 2016 is when I set out on this path of being a coach and a sounding board to leaders. So to your point, I'm sort of coming back to your point about success and potential. I think initially I saw success as climbing something and potential as thriving in work. But I think having spent time working with leaders through the podcast, through my reflections, having written the book, etc., I've come to realize we all have potential across the various identities we carry, right? I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a coach, I play the guitar, I'm a podcaster. And I think there is an opportunity for expression of potential across each of these dimensions. So how do we really live a holistic life and play to potential across the various dimensions is something I'm exploring. I'm curious. I don't think I have all the answers, but I think that's how I think about potential. It's not a single dimension. It's multidimensional. And success, I feel I've moved from the metaphor of climbing something and reaching somewhere to saying, given the context where I am I thriving? Am I contributing? I think there's a little more of not how much I've achieved, but how much I've contributed, which gives me greater joy. I think that's I don't know, that's not a clean answer, but that's at least where my head is right now.
Sets the stage to how we want to structure this conversation.
Sure.
So thank you for this.
Sure.
I got my answer.
Okay.
I've divided this conversation into kind of 3-4 chapters.
Yeah.
Because, of course, when I'm precisely sitting with authors, I know that there is a lot of subconscious wealth that through the conversation we need to explore, and we need to, if I am able to even, scratch at the surface level, the knowledge and the wealth that authors have. I've experienced it myself when I'm sitting for deep conversations. It gives me very great level of joy that, from the book now, it is, the words have transformed into written words into verbal words. So the chapter 1 that I'm trying to focus is more on the achievement illusion, because I happen to also go through the literature that you are into. I've been a fan of Harvard Business Review researchers, because that used to be our, window to the how leadership is happening in the world forever. And it remains a very credible source of, leadership information till today. What do you think about this concept of post-achievement dip? So, senior executives experience they want to chase this, they have achieved, and then there is a crash. How we say after workouts, dopamine is up, then there is a crash. So you're constantly trying to feed yourself with newer targets. Have you experienced this? My question, very precise to this, would be, why does achievement sometimes create emptiness? Is this statement true for leaders?
I think there is truth to it, right? I think there's this famous case of Michael Phelps winning all these medals and coming back and going through a phase of depression, right? I think it's sort of well documented. There's another term that I've come across called the astronaut syndrome. You go to the moon and come back, now what? Because you've pretty much achieved whatever you need to. I remember I'm a big fan of this comedian, Jerry Seinfeld. And somebody asked him, there was an interview where he's asked, how did you change after the money came in? And his response was, the money comes in very early in the journey. And if you're doing it for the money, then you plateau very quickly.
Correct.
You have to be consumed by something which is beyond the money. So I think what I've observed in my journey and in many other journeys, Poonam, is I think this is where a little bit of the why and the purpose starts beginning to matter. I think if you're there for the success, if you're there for the glory, if you're there for the money, then I feel people that hit the milestone very often go through a period of soul searching and emptiness and now what kind of a feeling. But if the purpose is beyond that, if it's framed as a contribution, and if there's a larger, if I may say, either a pursuit of excellence or a pursuit of contribution, then I think that gives you the fuel to sort of, yes, acknowledge the successes along the way, but not hit a funny dead end or a funny semicolon. So I think it does show up in the case of some of the people I work with, right? I think sometimes the discussion is about really how do you reframe your purpose given where you are. When you've already made enough wealth for your generation and maybe the next one or two generations.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean, but going to the beach and not doing anything for the rest of your life is also not as glamorous as it sounds. It's sort of many people feel empty after that. So I think I feel the people that are able to move beyond that in a meaningful way end up doing a little bit of, not a little bit, quite a bit of soul searching around who they are, what matters to them, what gives them joy, and what is the contribution they can make. And in a way, that sort of gives them fuel to play the long game. At least that's the way I've experienced it myself. I was, strangely enough, when I published the book, I'd had a book launch event in Worli, went well received, etc. I think that was 1 or 2 days before the book launch. And then the next 3-4 nights, I didn't sleep well. And I was telling my wife, Kamini, saying it's a very strange thing. Sab kuch acha chal raha hai.
Acha ho gaya hai.
But still there's a... And also even when we started the podcast, Play to Potential podcast about 9 years back, there was a phase where you would look at the number of clicks and you would say, okay, we've done all this hard work and there's only so much. So I think what I've also realized is the book anxiety was because I was saying how many volumes will sell, will it be 1K, 2K, how do I sell? I mean, there was a lot of concern about the outcomes. But I feel, I have found myself being caught in these kinds of situations. But I feel those are the times where I try and be a little more deliberate about detaching myself from specific outcomes and just doing the work and then seeing how it plays out. So I think I think the short answer I feel is that's where you need to tune into something that's bigger than just the goalpost. Correct. Because the goalpost will come and go. What after that is the real question.
I think it's very easier when you are in the senior to mid career because the goalpost is next progress, next promotion, next package. It's very easy. Like when you're studying, you clear first, you go to second.
The goalpost is clear. Correct.
You give best shot in your exam, you have best marks. That is the goalpost. And then, okay, now.
Correct.
Third, fourth, fifth. I sometimes reflect on it. The life was so good. You just knew where to go.
Correct.
And I think mid to senior is the best time because you think that is the best time. My question to you would be because you can play your potential to the best. Which is a good time to play the potential to your best?
I think I wish there was a simple answer. I think it varies a lot. What I've observed is just like in businesses, we talk about product market fit.
Yeah.
I see many people who hit talent market fit early on. This is my talent. I'm meant to be an ad agency person, and then you thrive. And then you can, if you found that fit, then you can really accelerate. But I see many people who struggle with that talent market fit for a while, till their 30s, sometimes early into the 40s, because they're going with the sort of the traditional versions of what is success. And suddenly they realize this is someone else's ladder, but they still say, okay, the money is decent. They keep climbing, but they are making the money, but are often miserable. For them, that transition, that phase might be very painful. And I think that's also the time where the personal life context also starts influencing how you feel, right? It's not just how you're doing at work. So sometimes if you've made maybe a poor choice in terms of either where to live or your life partner, then some of those things start playing out. So I think it's a complicated question, but I think the one thing I've noticed on the professional front is, have you achieved talent market fit? That's not to say it's static. I mean, that varies as we go through. But for example, if I take my journey, when I was a search consultant, I felt I could do the job, but it wasn't tuning into what gave me joy. One of the examples I give is in a search firm, very often the primary job is to find a candidate for a client.
Correct.
Right? The client is looking for a CMO, then they hire a search firm, you meet candidates, you evaluate them, you have a short list, they meet the client, etc., etc. But along the way, you also spend time with candidates counseling on their careers, right? Because if you're interviewing them, they often in the last 5 minutes, they'll say, what do you think I should be doing?
Yes.
I mean, we've done the interview for the job, but now let's have a real conversation about me. And then you talk to them about, their journey. Now, about 3-4 years into my last job, my office managing partner asked me, tell me, Deepak, what were the moments of joy in the last year? Not moments of impact. What did you enjoy? And I remember telling him my highest points of happiness were when I counseled a couple of CEOs on their career. And they emailed me saying, this is the best advice I've ever got from a search consultant. To which my office leader looked at me and said, that's not how we make money. That's wonderful. But we are in the business of serving clients, right? So that's when I realized, I talk about this doing-being tension. What I was doing and who I was being were pulling me in different directions.
Yeah.
So when I aligned that and moved from poaching to coaching, I feel there's a greater alignment between what I am doing and who I am being. So at least I don't have to be anyone else. I can just be myself. And then you tap into a source of energy which gets you to do much more than what you can. Then you start marching towards your potential. I mean, one of the best advice I got, one of the questions I ask as I wrap my podcast is, what does the term play to potential mean to you? And one of the guests, Abhijit Bhaduri, I should give credit where it's due. He was, I think, the 7th or 8th guest. He said the answer is in your title. And said, what do you mean? He said, you can't work to your potential. You can only play to your potential. So I think big part of our lives is really figuring out what is play. And then once you find that fit, again, it's a vague notion, but I think all of us know when we find it.
Correct.
When you're playing, you have to really pull the children out of the playground. They'll keep playing, right? So when you're playing, you don't clock hours. You don't say, I'll play only for 1 hour. You'll play as long as you want. So I think so a big part of which phase of life is interesting is often a function of when you discover play. And if you found a market for it, then I think then you start accelerating. And different people, I think, get to that point at different points in their journey, I feel.
Very wonderfully explained. I think the word play, now that you have given a very simple word to the mindset-led problem when the money is fine, but the joy is less.
Correct.
And it's a very conflicting mental paradox. Constantly you're debating. And this gives the answer that I think the word play is very important. What I am understanding from you is that it's a play.
Correct.
So
it doesn't feel laborious. It feels natural, and you don't put a clock to it. You will do it.
You will do it
as long as you need to.
Lovely. I think this is very impactful.
I think credit to Abhijit Bhaduri for sometimes one of the biggest advantages of doing a podcast like this is when you meet people, they give you different mental models to live life. So
Correct.
This mental model is thanks to Abhijit Bhaduri.
Wonderful. I think I need to invite him also on the pod.
I think he's a very curious person and has reinvented himself many times.
Sure.
So,
are leaders over-optimizing performance at the cost of identity and health?
Again, this is a very broad question. But I think the one
Maybe
thing
some examples could help from your coaching practice.
The one thing I will say is I think the piece around identity is a very powerful one. Very often, I think a lot of us run into the trap of assuming that our professional identity is the only identity we have. I feel that it's a little more pronounced in India compared to, let's say, some of the other markets I've lived in, like the US and UK. I think if I'm a managing director of a bank, then that's my only identity. So sometimes really, one of the things I discuss in the book as well is, how do you really take stock of the various identities you have? You're a father, you're a mother, or whatever, right? I think you're a sibling, you're a child, you're a member of a community, etc., etc.
Correct.
Doing really well in your career is a bit like scoring 100 in math. but failing the other subjects. The real question is how do you do the exam of life, which has many subjects, and many subjects are the many identities we have.
Yeah,
wonderful. If you just focus on the math, you might ace math, you might be the MD, you've got 100. Good,
Correct.
well done. But you're not passing grade 10 if you failed the other subjects. So how do you, so 100 in math, but a 30 in biology is not a good scorecard. So similarly, how are you as a parent? How are you as a sibling? How are you? I think that's so to your point, yes. And I feel when I see people thriving, and also this is where potential also is about how we play the long game, right? Assuming all of us, given advances in healthcare, etc., all of us will lead a reasonably long life. So it's a bit like, once again, I make the distinction between T20 and Test cricket, right? So T20, you might make a 30 in 10 balls.
Correct.
But that's great for a T20. But a 30 in 10 balls in a 5-day match is not a great score because you've got a long innings. There's no unlimited number of balls you can play. So there's no need to. So I think there's also something about how we pace ourselves, how we play the long game with health. So that's where one of the themes I talk about is how do we think about our intangible balance sheet? We often.
What is that?
So the tangible balance sheet is the home we own, the car we own, the assets we have, the fixed deposits we have. That's a tangible balance sheet because that's the wealth we have. What about the intangible balance sheet in terms of relationships? What is the asset of relationships you have? What is the quality of your health? What is the quality of relationship, the health, happiness in your family? These are all intangible assets which help you play the long game with vitality, right? So again, I'm just saying, when we think about performance, again, I'm sort of trying to say, how do we think about performance over a longer horizon? Because we are here to play a test match. Like a 2020 in your 30s, suddenly you might be a 30 under 30. But you might be eating sort of pills for depression because, nothing against early success, but I'm just saying sometimes we see only the math score. We don't see the score in the other subjects. So unless we really look at the full report card, sometimes it's hard to tell how somebody is doing. And so in a way, the book is also an attempt at getting people to take stock of life in a slightly more holistic sense so that they can make be a little more intentional about the various identities and play the long game with health and vitality. That's the way I see it.
Beautiful concept. I think you have another book with this concept. Deepak, seriously.
Let's see.
Balance sheet of
intangibles.
Wow.
That's a good
I'm
point.
reminded of what you were mentioning just some time ago about this women leader who approached and she read your book. You want to discuss about that conversation? How it impacted her?
True. I think the example I was saying was an individual who had read the book felt it would be relevant for a friend of his, a 30-year-old lady who had lost her husband. So he asked me if he could gift the book to her, because one of the themes I discuss in the book also is how do we deal with transitions? Because I've realized life is not a straight line. We all go through some transition or the other. Transition could either be things like maternity in the case of women. It could be, it could be being laid off. It could be a health shock in the family. Like in my case, when I came from the US to India to take care of my father's treatment, that was another thinker who's influenced me a lot is a gentleman called Bruce Feiler. And he's written a book called Life is in the Transitions. And he uses the term life quake. Right? All of us have different life quakes at different times. He said once in every 10, 15 years, he says every person, whether you like it or not, goes through a life quake where it feels like somebody has pulled the carpet under your legs. So this person felt my book could be relevant for this lady who just lost her husband. And, I think that the conversation we were having was in the context of the book. Of course, it's now a bestseller. More than 10,000 people have read it, etc. It gives me joy. But I think these stories and these anecdotes of having made a difference to people, when they're going through a period of difficulty, it's deeply fulfilling when you hear. Sure. So I think the core point is when you go through a transition like this, how do you reorient yourself?
रुकावट के लिए खेद है. अगर आपको हमारा कंटेंट और कॉन्वर्सेशंस अच्छे लग रहे हैं तो प्लीज लाइक, सब्सक्राइब एंड शेयर करिए अपने फैमिली मेंबर्स और फ्रेंड्स के साथ. Thank you so much for watching.
Deepak, any difficult question you have faced in your coaching practice from women leaders specifically? Or a resonating question maybe, if not a difficult question?
I would say some questions which probably come up a little more in the case of women. One is, I think, just this whole. I feel while men and women both need to be intentional about designing a full life, I feel women do it much more than men. I just feel men. I'm sorry, sort of making a blanket statement. I think just the percentage of women who think about life in a holistic sense, I would say, is instinctively much higher than men. Men, I just feel a lot of times just feel that they focus on the career and do a little bit on the family, then they can get away with it. So I think, and that leads to a branch of questions, right? I think some of the work I do is also in the context of transitions. So I was working with a senior lady, a woman partner in a leading advisory firm, consulting firm, that was looking to transition and do something else. And as she was evaluating options, one of the key metrics was, what does it mean in terms of my daughter? Will it give me the flexibility to take care of, my parenting duties?
Yeah.
And very often, and I could see that as we were evaluating various opportunities, the pros and cons, of course, the money, etc., was there. But this piece, she was very intentional about. And I think that's one theme that very often comes up. It shows up differently in the case of different people. But I think just this whole, parenting, caregiving. One of the other senior leaders I work with, I'm currently working with, she runs a social impact organization. She used a lovely phrase. She said, I've sort of navigated my work around my life.
So she's playing it well.
Yeah. So rather than fitting life into your work, in the context of your work, she's saying, life takes its ups and downs. Her husband follows a career. But she sort of managed to, one of the 6 people I profiled in my book is a lady called Shoma. She's a classmate and a friend. Her husband is a successful banker. She started out in Citibank, but as they moved from India to Hong Kong to here to the US, she used to be a painter as a child. She sort of repurposed that, done a course on therapy, and she does arts-based therapy for kids in New York who have development needs.
Wow.
So I think I just feel that's one theme. How do I structure my work around my life is one theme that very often comes up in my conversations with women. I think the other theme that very often comes up is how do I keep my originality or keep my individuality, but still assert myself in boardrooms, which are still often male dominated. Because very often they have their norms. They might catch up in a golf club. They might catch up in a certain context. So how do I really contribute, but still not do things that, don't give me joy or that I don't want to do? So how do I walk that tightrope of impact without diluting my style?
Wow.
Right? It's one thing to say, okay, I won't do it. Then you're diluting impact. You're giving your control away, or you're giving your power away. How do I keep the power without necessarily playing the game based on the terms that have been set by the current people, which are largely men? I think that's the other theme that very often comes up.
You have answer for this question?
Varies from case to case. I think one of the people I learned this from is Rama Bijapurkar. She's a successful thought leader, especially around consumer behavior. She actually said in the podcast when I met her that sometimes, you have people meeting in a certain context, in all the board members meeting somewhere one evening late, they have drinks, etc. She said, I don't want to do that. So I would have one-on-one meetings with them. So I would find to balance. So rather than treating it as a yes, no, will I attend that get together or not? How do I find my set of activities and structure influence the way I want to do it? So she would say I would have one-on-one coffee conversations in the morning with a few people. I forget specifically what she said, but the core point was we all have a style and we all have a set of preferences. So how do we take advantage of that? So rather than treating it as a binary, how do we create chances or opportunities to sort of move things to our favor in terms of how we operate, what gives us energy, and what's feasible within the constraints of our life?
It's very ironical because it's not about just the work, right? I mean, you're good at work. You go to work, you do your work, you come back.
Yes.
But that's not what we are talking about.
True. I think work is one element of life, but there's much more.
In the work arena also, Now, when she says that I am structuring, how important is FaceTime? Because I believe we are not robots working. A robot will start the work and finish it. When it is human beings, what is it that sets a human being different from B? Not necessarily being just a performer or a potentially very good person with respect to skill set. How important is FaceTime? When you're talking, let me rephrase it, this question. When you are talking to leaders, what is it that they feel they are supposed to do and they are bound to do? Is there a difference between what they're supposed to then do and what they're bound to do?
I think my not an expert on the topic, but my observation, Poonam, is when two people get together, whether it's a coaching conversation or a boss subordinate or whatever, or even our team, right? When I meet my colleagues Akash and Arman, we have a remote working setup, but we do catch up every now and then. I think we not only bring the work problems to the conversation, right? We bring our whole personality.
Yes.
Right? Sometimes the discussion is about personal lives, sometimes it's about health, sometimes it's about something else. So I think finally what I've come to realize is man is a social being, right? I think we need to be in company of people that give us a certain energy, and all of us radiate a certain type of energy, right? So really, so not everything can be seen in the lens of just effective corporate performance, right? We all saw when COVID initially, we went through a phase of, wow, this is super efficient. We can have back-to-back calls and everything gets done. But within 2-3 months, I think people were splitting their hair. I mean, not in my case, but people were scratching their heads. Scratching their heads, saying people are experiencing all kinds of anxiety, and we need to be back. So I think there is one is of course the productivity lens, but I think there's also a social sciences lens where man is a social man. When I say man, human beings are a social creature, and I think there's something about I think the longest study of happiness in Harvard, I think which stretched over multiple decades, I think 80 years or whatever, headed by Robert Waldinger, said I think the single most predictor of well-being when people age is relationships, right? Correct. And it could be relationships with, colleagues is one, but friends, and just I think people that have those thriving relationships, I feel end up happier. So sorry, it's a long-winded response, but I think FaceTime, I feel, is just one element of sort of interaction between two people, which actually is about two energies coming together.
Correct.
And two people with their full life context engaging with each other. And sometimes it's much more than work that transpires.
Deepak, I get fascinated when I sit with leaders and they use the word energy in every podcast of mine. If the word energy is used, then I want to ask always a follow-up question. What's your definition of energy?
In the human...
Your definition of energy.
I think there's a scientific definition, but the context in which I use it is really what are you energy is almost like light, right? What are you injecting into the conversation or into the other person's life that moves them forward, right? That's the way I think about energy. Am I one of the metaphors that very often I use is radiator or a drain. Some people are
enabler, maybe?
Some people are like a radiator. You go near them and they are beaming, they are happy, and they sort of they transmit that happiness to you and you come back happy. Some people like a drain, you go and you come back and your head is heavy, right? So I think energy is really about what's coming out of you, which can potentially cause a chain reaction, and that sort of maybe either changes the mood of the other person or inspires the other person or moves the other person in a certain direction.
And I'm now moving a little bit to the CEO psychology piece. Okay. And of course, the loneliness part will come in my questions. There is a 2022 recent survey found, I'm not getting into the details, we'll leave the links. Nearly 50% of CEOs report feeling isolated in their role. So the question is, this is a known fact. Everyone says this. You are alone at the top and corner office and XYZ. But is leadership loneliness structurally, or it is self-created? That's my question.
I think in general there's a structural element to this, right? I think by definition you're at the apex of the pyramid. So very often as we go through a journey, there are peers who are experiencing the same set of issues where you can share, you might have a boss that you both don't like and you can sort of talk about that. That's often a good uniting factor.
Yeah.
And so on. But when you get to the top, some of those peer groups disappear and you don't have anyone else who understands your context, because in a way there's a head of HR, there's a head of finance, they all bring their own context, but the integrator is just you. So that's a reason there's an organization called YPO, Young Professional Organization, or EO, which basically provides some sort of companionship to these people to say, if you have a problem, here's a safe space. I think that's the other thing, right? A CEO, if he or she goes outside to discuss any problem quickly, the world judges them, right? They don't have the luxury of sharing what they're going through. So I think there is a structural piece to this. I don't deny it. Some people, of course, navigate it better than some others. So I think the key is really having sometimes the role I play of a coach and sounding board sometimes is about providing that space, right? One of the leaders I worked with, there were a couple of private equity investors. The leader was sort of really tiptoeing around the various sensitivities, right? There are sensitivities at the team level, at the board level, etc. And just having somebody else you could bounce ideas, saying, yeah, it's a bit like cricket, should I play this ball on the front foot or the back foot, or should I leave this ball? How should I think about this? So I think the loneliness is real. And I think the key antidote to that I see is really, how do you create space for yourself, either through organizations like YPO, EO, etc., or through a coach, or in some cases, if there are two professionals who are pursuing an ambitious career, sometimes the spouse can play that role of a sounding board, where, let me give you an example, right? I have confidentiality in the context of the work I do with my clients. I don't share the details. But in the case of one of the people I was working with, he'd actually been denied a promotion that he was very keen. And he actually felt personally, he went through a little bit of self-doubt and self-questioning phase, where he told me during a coaching conversation, Deepak, I just shut myself in the bathroom and I would spend half an hour, wouldn't come out. I felt like a failure in front of my child, etc., etc. And without revealing the details, we were just having a dinner conversation, my wife and I, and she said, you should escalate this. This is a red flag. You don't want him to do anything funny. And you should tell the boss. And my first response was, but there's confidentiality.
Yeah.
But she said there's something beyond that. Confidentiality, we have, there's a life at risk. So don't be silly. I'm just saying that, sometimes we're just so consumed in the role that we don't see the same problem from a different lens.
Oh, yeah.
And then I happened to have a good conversation with his boss, and eventually, I had to say, just be careful with the situation, because if you don't handle this well, suddenly you might have, we are looking at a very delicate situation here. So just, I guess the point I'm making is people are lonely and they want to succeed, and sometimes, they want to also project a brave front in front of the people around them. So they go through stuff. So in this case, he was working with me. I could pick it up. Actually, my wife picked it up. She nudged me to escalate it, etc., etc. So even I'm lonely in my profession, right? I might have my blind spots in the way I read a situation.
Correct.
So in this case, sharing with her, she happens to be she's a psychologist and she has a practice. So that
this explains.
So she was also somebody who could have a point of view on this, and that was useful. But I think the point is, we all sometimes get blinkered in the way we see a situation. And the more we can open ourselves to other sources of input, either through a forum or through friends or through a coaching engagement, I just feel it just helps us navigate life better.
Sure. And this beautifully plugs into the concept of self-awareness for leaders. So there's a McKinsey research that shows that self-awareness strongly correlates with leadership effectiveness. So this is a established fact, that you need to be aware of your strength, you need to be aware of your weaknesses, standard thing. And yet most leaders overestimate their self-awarenesses. Why? Are we blinded by external world, or we just don't want to listen
Hmm.
or face? What is it?
Now this is like
Spill some beans.
you're preaching to the converted. So my book has 9 chapters. 1/3 of the book is about self-awareness. Right, the first section is self-awareness because I just feel, if I zoom out maybe a little bit. See, I think in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the careers were linear. Right, I think. My father was in a bank for 35, 40 years. My father-in-law was in the army for 35 years. One organization.
Straight.
And generally, if you consider, back to metaphors, if you consider yourself to be an automobile, the part that matters is the engine. People with a more superior engine raced ahead and did well. Horsepower, right? And that could be just talent, hard work, smarts, etc. But I think careers today feel more like a maze.
Correct.
With AI, with new opportunities coming in, I think we need to be making many more turns. We, our kids, etc., etc. So the piece that becomes more important is the steering wheel. Of course, you need a decent engine, but a Ferrari with a bad steering wheel is not going to win the race through the maze, right? Which has many more turns. And that steering wheel in my mind is self-awareness. I just feel so. Therefore, I feel it's a lot more important today than it was maybe 40 years back. It's always been important. But I'm just saying, because careers also, it's not a straight line, right? Earlier, it was very simple, right? Doctor, engineer, architect, etc. 3, 4 things. But today, unless you really are aware of who you are, what your strengths are, what your subjects are, what gives you interest, you will end up making a mistake. Because if you end up choosing because, that's the place where there's more money to be made, you'll end up finding yourself in a funny place. Now, I think we are also a poor judge of how self-aware we are. And I think one of the metaphors I use in the book is also that of Nasruddin Hoxha. Right? There's a lovely story where, I think a man was looking for keys under the street light. Somebody asks him, why are you looking for it here? He says, this is where there's light. But the man says, is this where you lost the keys? He said, no, I lost the keys inside the home. But it's just easier for me to find the keys here because there's light. So very often, the reason I say this is, all companies have sort of 360 feedback and some sort of a report. And people think that's self-awareness. No, I think there's much more than that. How does your family perceive you? How do your friends perceive you? How do your various stakeholders perceive you? Because we are, again, back to the various identities. I think one of the elements of self-awareness is really being intentional about how different people see us. I mean, one of the people I spoke to in my podcast was a lady called Tasha Eurich, who's written a lovely book called Insight, where she says that internal self-awareness and external self-awareness are different things. Internal self-awareness is going through mindfulness, meditation, reflection, journaling. It's basically us making sense of who we are, our childhood, me reflecting my way on who I am. External self-awareness is how the world thinks of me. And very often that can be different. And unless we really work with both are important. So it's not to say one is more important than the other. For example, after my search firm, after McKinsey, I was considering roles in investing, banking, corporate roles, etc. One of my mentors looked at me and said, you seem to have a passion for the people side of things. Have you thought of executive search?
Correct.
Now, there's no way I could have meditated under a tree and got to that insight. That
some human being
some
gave you.
human being who sees me and who has a different point of view of careers and me gave me that view. Even in my podcast conversation, one of my guests was Atul Kasbekar, the celebrated photographer. One of the questions I asked him was, how did you transition from being a photographer to a producer? He said when photography was getting saturated with, many smartphone cameras and this and that, I went and met some family friend of mine, and he looked at me and said, you seem to be like a credible platform on which people can collaborate, in an industry that's otherwise quite murky. So I said, okay, platform. What does a platform mean? Then maybe I can produce and I can create the climate where people can come and collaborate. So in a way, the point I'm making is that feedback. How do we, the fact that we can look at ourselves differently, like back to my journey, at some point I was saying, should I build a large organization or stay small? One of my friends and colleagues looked at me and said, Deepak, you seem to have an artisanal mindset. You should stay small. Now, these are things that people observe. So the more we can mine into how the world sees us and marry it with internal self-awareness, then I think we just have a canvas of awareness which gives us data for us to make choices.
These are good data points.
And in a world, I mean, the other
How
piece.
does one ask somebody like this?
See, I think it's just sometimes these come through in whispers and conversations. See, sometimes it's not.
You can't ask.
It's you can. I mean, sometimes in the coaching work I do, the first 3-4 months is actually working on the person's self-awareness, external self-awareness, and
Correct.
internal self-awareness. But even otherwise, people keep telling you things, right? For example, somebody might say, "Hey, you seem to be enjoying music." Like, for example, my son is a passionate dancer. So as people tell him, your eyes light up when you dance. The point is, people keep telling you these things. Now, sometimes we don't pay adequate attention to some of these whispers. They may not come packaged as feedback.
Correct.
But I think just tuning into some of these whispers, I think can give us clues. I think the point I was trying to make was, the other thing I've also realized is, in a world of abundant choice, again, this goes back to the maze point, right? Earlier, there was one channel, Doordarshan. All of us watched it growing up, right? There was Mahabharat at 10 o'clock on Sunday, and all of us saw it. Today, there's multiple TV channels, OTT platforms, YouTube, WhatsApp, TikTok, etc., etc. Now, half the time is really figuring out what do you want to watch.
Correct.
There's a lovely thinker called Barry Schwartz who's written a book called Paradox of Choice. And he says, in a world of abundant choice, you would think that customers are happier, but actually they are more confused. They're more confused and unhappy because there's FOMO. Maybe you're wondering somebody else is seeing something or doing something. And that's true to careers as well, true for everything. So all the more, and he says the only solution to this is being self-aware. Then you can make choices consistent with who you are.
Correct.
Otherwise, in a world of abundant options, very easy to do something because somebody else is doing it and find yourself in a funny place. Sorry, a long-winded response, but
No, very well explained. I think this answers beautifully what I'm trying to understand. So if someone at 45 feels stuck despite success, you would come across such people very often. What are they actually confronting? Is it fatigue, fear, or misalignment?
it could be some of this, all of this, something else. Sometimes it's
A keyword that comes often when you're talking to leaders.
Sometimes it's just they've made the money, they've achieved the success. I think it's just the meaning is often missing. In some cases, it's a meaning vacuum problem, right? There's no meaning. I'm making a lot of money, but what difference is it making? One more deal, that sort of feeling hollow inside. That's one use case or one category of problems. I think another category of problems is career is going well, but family relationships, I think there's a lot of tension, some which are strained, some which are broken. That's sort of another category of problems. The third category is all that is fine, but health. I'm having health problems. How long can I do this? Because, I'm enjoying it today, but I don't see I can do this for much longer. So I think it's varies from case to case, but I think very often it's a combination of either purpose vacuum, relationship type challenges, health challenges. I would say broadly these three have been the biggest sources of where and what next? What's the next mountain to climb, right? I think just like businesses think about where to play, how to win in the context of their business, I feel we all think about where to go and how to grow at various points in time. Where to go is like after your 12th, there's a where to go choice. BCom, BA, BSc, BTech. After your first job, there's a where to go choice. But once you made the choice, you start climbing that mountain.
Correct.
When you hit that mountain, suddenly you say, now I've climbed this mountain. What next? Now, should I do more of this? Should I do something else? Should I do a portfolio of things? That can be quite disorienting for people, especially given it's lonely. They also don't know who to discuss this with, right? So I think that's another thing. What next is a question that many people grapple with.
I think you've defined it very well. I can visualize, and that is the point where you need somebody to come as a coach in your life. I'm trying to say that a coach is a very important person. We may think, and that's why, I'll tell you something. There is a number that I have, and it is mind blowing. The global coaching is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. I'm not even getting into the specifics of the number. So there is a reason it is a big industry today, because with education gone up, strategic investment in understanding careers have gone up, understanding of careers have gone up. Fragmentation is more, but approach towards career is, overall education worldwide has gone up. Especially in India, you see that education is being given so much of importance across states, you can say. So this generation is much more informed thanks to tech also, digital also. They have direction, but then they are achieving their goals also faster than what the previous one did. So the roadblock is real. Who coaches the coach, Deepak?
I don't have one person who's coached me all the way, but there have been moments or different phases where I've engaged a coach. Right? One is, of course, I try and spend time gathering feedback from the clients a little more intentionally. Even when they choose to work with me, I say, why me? Why not somebody else? How can I add value, etc. But when I wrote the book, Play to Potential, I decided to engage a coach. Actually, it's somebody I know, a batchmate and a friend of mine, Shweta Mani. I decided that I didn't want to be blindsided just by my approach. I said, that, why don't you just come on board as a coach and my sounding board?
Wow.
Almost like the role I play with my clients. So she worked with me for a couple of years. And I'm very grateful because she was the one who pushed me to say, what do you really mean by potential? I said, play to potential. And initially, my book was meant to be essays on potential. One on resilience, one on self-awareness, one on reinvention, etc.
The leadership qualities, you mean?
But she looked at me and said, what's different about this? What is it that you truly believe in? And then as I spent time with her, I developed the clarity that I really believe that potential is multidimensional.
Wow.
And I want to really talk about how people can lead a full life and play to potential in a holistic sense. And I would say that clarity came because of sparring with her. Shweta, I'm very grateful. Because sometimes coaching is not a linear process, right? It's not just making you 20% better.
Correct.
But it's about, I use the metaphor of 9 3/4 platform in Harry Potter. Sometimes you explore a world that you didn't know existed behind the platform. So that's a journey where, working with her, I felt really unlocked something that I couldn't have imagined when I started out. So the short answer is, don't have a coach that works with me all the time, but whenever I feel I need some help, I mean, this is one example where I worked with a coach and I feel I got much more than what I thought I would get.
Thank you for sharing this with us. So Deepak, we have some questions that we have. It's almost, I want to talk to you for like 5 hours. And I say this to all my guests, people tomorrow may just pick up and say that you say this too, but everyone who's coming is so powerful in their head. They have so much of knowledge that you would want to spend 5-6 hours decode everything that they know. These are the questions which are more like very curious questions or viewers' choice questions. So what we do typically is, before we have a guest on the podcast, your details go to several people who are connected to us through our socials or different lists that we have. And we try to understand and then bring to you the questions that we thought were most asked. So,
and these are sort of rapid fire, quick response questions.
Quick is okay. And if you want to give, more than happy.
Okay.
So many online forums question whether executive coaching is worth the investment. Now, is coaching only for elite, or can deep growth be democratized? What do you think about this?
I think the role of coach is always useful, right? I think the nature of the coach might change. Maybe initially it can be self-learning. I think definitely not of the view that it needs to be only for elite. I feel we all need some sort of a coach who can help us become a better version of ourselves. Sometimes it's the parents doing their job with their children.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes, different people play that role. You may not call them the coach. Sometimes it's a boss at work. Sometimes it's a friend who unlocks a better version of who we are. Sometimes it's our spouse, etc., etc. So I think the point is, at any point in time, just ensuring that there's somebody around us, so there are some people around us who show the mirror, who help us become a better version. Sometimes it's structured as a contract with somebody external as a coach, but I see coaching as a role that needs to be played by the ecosystem we are in. And I would urge everybody to have somebody, at least one person who plays the role of a coach. Whether they are called a coach or not, I don't know. But I think who's playing the role of a coach. That's the way I see it.
Wonderful. There's a growing skepticism that leadership coaching creates dependency.
Mhm.
And this question came like it was a regular question. How do you ensure leaders don't outsource their thinking to you? Like, it can happen. Possible.
It can happen. I think that's when maybe just being a little picky about language. That's when sometimes it gets into the realm of mentoring and telling. If the person comes with a problem and I said, I've seen the movie, I've done it like this, then I'm sort of creating the dependency. But if the mode of interaction is questioning the person and getting them to come with the answer and then maybe pressure testing the answer, then hopefully we are sort of in a way building the muscle of being independent. So I think it's the answer lies in the way the intervention happens.
Correct.
If it's like you have a problem, I have the answer, then it's like going to a pharmacist and he or she giving you a pill. But if it's much more of starting a line of inquiry and pressure testing and then sort of helping them make better decisions. So I think that's where the line is. So
and that's where the essence of coaching also is.
Yes.
It lies in
correct. Helping people find the answer.
People find their answers.
Correct.
This answers this well. So if someone watching feels successful but strangely unfulfilled right now, this conversation, what is the first honest question they should ask themselves tonight? Just one question they should ask.
What is the source of my unhappiness, if there's a word like that? I think sometimes just placing a finger on, very often what I've noticed is we get consumed by vague thoughts. But I think the more we can, that's why, one of the things we do is also we come out with journals where people can reflect on different questions. So just journaling, why am I unhappy? And sometimes as you put things down, we ourselves develop clarity on, okay, maybe I can solve this. So I think just tracing the source of unhappiness. For example, I was losing sleep 3-4 days when I launched the book. When I stayed with why am I losing sleep, I somehow felt that I was doing it because I was over anxious about the metrics and the results. Then I caught myself doing it and I said, there have been instances in the past where I've done it, it hasn't helped. And slowly I said, okay, let's just focus on the inputs, not the outputs. But I'm just saying, if I just keep saying I'm not getting sleep, that's not useful. But really...
Can I give the credit to your wife here? What's her name, sorry?
Kamini.
Kamini ji. Because I'm very sure she intervened.
Yeah, she's...
she would have intervened to tell you.
She's the coach's coach. You were asking me, right? She's the coach's coach. Absolutely. And I think that's where, while we may not have a coach, somebody who plays that role is useful, who knows you and who knows your context.
And that's where the whole point of being a life partner comes alive.
Correct.
You're partnering your life, and openness in that relationship also helps a lot.
Correct. And I think it came up in one of my other conversations as well, is that even the notion of a life partner, earlier there was hunter-gatherer, then there was splitting of responsibilities. I think today's definition is like the life partner helps you become the best version of who you can become. Then I think it becomes a truly fulfilling relationship for both, where you're unlocking the best version of your partner and hopefully vice versa. So yeah, I think...
this brings us to a very good closure to this conversation. If potential, I'm picking up from play the potential that is right there. If potential had a voice, the word potential, in the room right now, what would it be asking every leader watching this episode?
Are you the best version of yourself? I think all of us have space for being better than who we are.
Yeah.
And I think it just, sometimes potential is just in the striving. It's not in the achieving, but it's in the striving. So just saying, am I the best version of who I am across the various identities and the various things I do and who I am? And I feel just even being honest with that question and striving across the various elements can hopefully move us towards our potential.
Thank you so much, Deepak. I so much enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome to the PVT Show podcast. I am your host, Poonam Vijay Thakkar. On this show, I bring to you conversations with leading authors and top leaders who energize the mind, challenge the norms, and awaken a purpose. It's all about conscious growth with one powerful book and one powerful story at a time.